sad news to report here. The world mourning the loss of martial arts legend Chuck Norris after he was hospitalized for a medical emergency. And Norris's breakout role as Bruce Lee's fierce opponent.
March 2026, Kauai, Hawaii. Chuck Norris, the living legend everyone called immortal, died at 86 after a sudden medical emergency. No warning, no public illness announced. Just one short, heartbreaking line from the family. But now, his private doctor of over 15 years has finally broken his silence. And what he just revealed is about to pull back the curtain on the darkest, most devastating secrets Chuck Norris carried silently for 86 years. Secrets far more heartbreaking than any rumor you've heard. This isn't another tabloid story. This is the truth the legend never wanted the world to know. If you're brave enough to see what even the toughest man on earth couldn't survive, smash that like button right now, subscribe and turn on post notifications. Because once this doctor starts talking, nothing about Chuck Norris will ever be the same again. Chapter 1, Sudden Death in the Bullied Boy. We will never forget the day. March 19th, 2026, Kauai, Hawaii. The call came without warning. Chuck Norris, the man the world had spent decades calling unbreakable, was rushed into emergency care after collapsing at his home. Less than 24 hours later, he was gone. 86 years old. No long public battle with illness. No dramatic final statement. Just one quiet line from the family. He passed surrounded by loved ones and at peace. But peace was the last thing the world felt. In the days that followed, as the news spread like wildfire, one voice finally broke the silence. Dr. Richard Harlan, the man who had been Chuck Norris's private physician for more than 15 years, stepped forward with the kind of truth few expected to hear. Chuck did not die from one simple cause, Dr. Harlan said quietly. His body had been carrying too much for far too long, and it started long before anyone ever called him a legend. Let's go back. Oklahoma and Texas, late 1940s and early 1950s. The boy who would one day become Chuck Norris was born Carlos Ray Norris into a world of dirt roads, broken bottles, and empty promises. His father drifted in and out, lost to alcohol. His mother worked long, exhausting hours just to keep food on the table. Young Carlos was painfully skinny, quiet, and sensitive. In the schoolyards of those dusty southern towns, the other boys smelled weakness and attacked it without mercy. They beat him regularly. They mocked him. They called him crybaby because he couldn't always hold back the tears when the punches landed. He was so small and frail that some days he begged his mother not to send him to school. "They're going to kill me one day," he once told her, his voice shaking. That fear never left him. He carried it like a shadow. Every insult, every fist, every moment of humiliation carved itself deep into his young soul. He learned early that the world could break you if you let it, and he swore in the quiet of his own heart that he would never let it happen again. One afternoon, after watching a martial arts demonstration, something inside the scrawny boy snapped. He made a promise to himself. He would never be the victim again. He joined the Air Force, trained with ferocious discipline, and eventually became a world champion in karate. But even as the trophies piled up and the Hollywood lights began to shine on him, that frightened little boy from Texas never fully disappeared. Dr. Harlan knew this better than almost anyone. Chuck told me many times that the boy who was bullied in those dusty schoolyards never really went away, the doctor revealed. Even after he became a world champion, even after he became a movie star, that terrified kid was still inside him, always pushing him, always forcing him to prove he was no longer weak. That same fear became the engine of his entire life. It drove him to push his body beyond normal limits well into his 80s. It drove him to create the unbreakable image the world loved. And according to Dr. Harlan, it may have also been the silent force that finally wore his heart down. The man the world called invincible had spent 86 years running from the memory of being the skinny, crying boy who got beaten up after school. And on that quiet day in March 2026, The running finally stopped. Chapter 2. Heart attack rumor and the pain that never left. The rumor spread faster than any bullet Chuck Norris had ever dodged on screen. Within hours of the announcement on March 19, 2026, the internet was flooded with the same three words, heart attack. People pointed to old stories from 2017 claiming he had suffered 2 massive heart attacks. Others dug up old clips of him clutching his chest during intense training scenes and declared it was only a matter of time. But Dr. Richard Harlan, the man who had cared for Chuck Norris's body and heart for more than 15 years, offered a much quieter, far heavier truth. Chuck did not die from one sudden heart attack, Dr. Harlan said in a calm but wary voice. His heart had been carrying too much for far too long, both physically and emotionally. The doctor paused, as if the weight of what he was about to share still pressed on him. Let me take you back to a day that changed Chuck forever. It was February 1970. Chuck Norris was 29 years old, already a rising martial arts champion and a new face in Hollywood. He had just welcomed his first son, Whelan, into the world with his first wife, Diane. The boy was bright, energetic, and full of the same fighting spirit his father possessed. Chuck often said Whelan was his greatest joy. Then came the telegram no parent should ever receive. On a quiet morning in 1970, Chuck learned that Whelan had been killed in action in Vietnam. The 20-year-old Marine had stepped on a landmine while on patrol. He died instantly. When the news reached Chuck, he collapsed to the floor of his living room. For days, he barely spoke. Friends who tried to comfort him said he sat motionless, staring at the wall, tears running silently down his face. Dr. Harlan remembered the first time Chuck opened up about that loss years later in his office. He sat right there, the doctor recalled, pointing to an empty chair. A grown man, a world champion, a movie star, and he cried like a child. He looked at me and said, "Doc, I lost my son. I lost my boy, but I'm not going to lose hope." That single sentence became Chuck's private mantra. Every single year on the exact anniversary of Whelan's death, Chuck would disappear. No interviews, no public appearances. He would go somewhere quiet, sometimes to the gravesite, sometimes to a secluded spot in the mountains, and sit alone in silence. He never made a big show of it. He never posted about it on social media. It was a private wound he carried for 56 years. Even as his career exploded in the 1980s and 90s, even as millions laughed at Chuck Norris facts and cheered for him as Walker, Texas Ranger, that quiet grief never left. Dr. Harlan continued, his voice softening. Physically, Chuck's heart was strong. He trained hard well into his 80s, but emotionally, that loss hollowed him out in ways people never saw. Every year on that date, his blood pressure would spike. His sleep would vanish. I could see the toll it took on his heart scans. The grief never healed. It just became part of him. Chuck himself once admitted in a rare vulnerable moment, "I can fight any man on this earth, but I can't fight the day I lost my son." The doctor leaned forward as he spoke the next words. That pain lived in his chest for over half a century. When his heart finally gave out on that March day in 2026, I believe it wasn't just due to a random heart attack. It was the accumulation of a lifetime of unhealed sorrow. The boy who was once bullied learned to fight with his fists. The man who lost his son never learned how to stop fighting the pain inside. So while the world rushed to call it a simple heart attack, Dr. Harlan saw something deeper. The same heart that had powered Chuck through wars, movies, and decades of superhuman toughness had finally been worn down by the one enemy it could never defeat, a father's grief that never faded. And that grief, according to the man who knew Chuck's heart best, may have been the silent force that ended the legend's long and painful journey. Chapter 3. The terminal illness rumor and the crushing weight of love. The second rumor hit even harder than the first. Within days of Chuck Norris's passing in March 2026, online forums and tabloid sites were flooded with claims that the action legend had been secretly battling a terminal illness for years. cancer, advanced kidney failure, or some rare condition he had hidden from the public to protect his invincible image. He knew he was dying, people whispered. That's why he went so quietly. Dr. Richard Harlan shook his head slowly when asked about it. Chuck did not hide a terminal illness, the doctor said firmly. There was no secret cancer, no long, undisclosed disease eating him from the inside. But what people don't understand is that he was exhausted, completely drained by something far more painful than any illness. He was exhausted by love. The story begins in the fall of 2017. Gina O'Kelly, Chuck's wife of nearly 20 years, went in for a routine MRI. What should have been a simple scan turned into a nightmare. The contrast dye used during the procedure triggered a catastrophic reaction. Within days, Gina's kidneys began to fail. Her body swelled. Her organs started shutting down. Doctors gave her a grim prognosis. She might not survive. Chuck Norris, the man who had faced down armies on screen and real-life enemies in real life, dropped everything. He canceled every appearance, every interview, every commitment. For the next several years, he rarely left her side. He slept in a chair beside her hospital bed. He learned how to administer medications, monitor machines, and cook meals that would not tax her damaged kidneys. Friends who visited said they barely recognized him. The once iron-tough action hero looked frail, hollow-eyed, running on adrenaline and prayer. Dr. Harlan remembered those years vividly. I told him many times, Chuck, you have to rest. You're going to kill yourself trying to save her. He would just give me that tired smile and say the same thing every single time. Doc, I already lost a son. I can't lose my wife. I won't survive that. Those words haunted the doctor. Chuck, who was already in his late 70s when Gina fell ill, pushed his body past every limit. He went days without real sleep. He ate whatever was left after making sure Gina could keep food down. The man who once trained 6 hours a day now spent those same hours holding his wife's hand, whispering encouragement while machines beeped around them. There were nights, Dr. Harlan revealed, when Chuck would sit alone in the hospital corridor at 3 a.m., staring at the wall, tears silently streaming down his face. The same man who had survived 2 divorces, the death of his firstborn son in Vietnam, and decades of Hollywood pressure was now watching the love of his life slip away, and he refused to let go. For years, this caregiving became his entire world. Even after Gina slowly began to stabilize, the damage to Chuck's own body was already done. His immune system weakened. His heart, already scarred by decades of grief over Whelan, took on a new burden. The physical toll of constant vigilance, poor sleep, and emotional exhaustion slowly eroded the legendary warrior from the inside. Dr. Harlan's voice grew quieter as he continued. People see Chuck Norris and think of roundhouse kicks and unbreakable bones. They don't see the man who sat beside his wife's bed for years, terrified that if he closed his eyes for even one night, she might slip away. That kind of love, it cost you everything. By the time 2026 arrived, Chuck was still smiling for the cameras when he had to. He still posted occasional training videos to keep the legend alive. But those closest to him knew the truth. The man who had once been larger than life was running on empty. The rumor of a hidden terminal illness was wrong. The real illness was invisible. It was the slow, devastating exhaustion of a husband who had already buried one child and refused to bury another soul he loved. And according to the doctor who watched it all unfold, that quiet, relentless sacrifice may have been the final blow that even Chuck Norris, the so-called toughest man alive, could not survive. Chapter 4: The Darkest Conspiracy and the Secret Daughter. The darkest rumor of all exploded online just 48 hours after Chuck Norris's death was announced in March 2026. Whispers spread like wildfire across conspiracy forums and social media. Someone wanted Chuck silent forever. AI-generated videos claimed he had been poisoned. Others insisted he was about to expose long-buried Hollywood secrets from the 1980s and 1990s. Some even suggested his own family had pressured him to stay quiet about certain inconvenient truths. The narrative was simple and terrifying. The invincible legend knew too much, and someone made sure he would never speak again. Dr. Richard Harlan, the man who had stood by Chuck's side for more than 15 years, let out a long, tired sigh when the question was put to him. There was no murder plot, he said quietly. No shadowy Hollywood cabal. No one silenced Chuck Norris. But what is true is that Chuck carried an enormous number of secrets, and the heaviest one of all was a daughter he never got to raise. Her name was Dina Norris. She was born in 1963, during the early turbulent years of Chuck's first marriage. The child came from an affair Chuck had while he was still a young martial arts instructor trying to survive in California. For 30 years, he knew nothing about her existence. Dina grew up believing her father was someone else entirely. She lived an ordinary life, unaware that the famous Chuck Norris was her biological father. Then in 1993, when Dina was 30 years old, the truth finally surfaced. A private investigator working on unrelated family matters stumbled upon the connection. The news was delivered to Chuck in a plain manila envelope one rainy afternoon in Los Angeles. He sat alone in his office, opened the folder, and stared at a photograph of a grown woman who looked strikingly like him. Dr. Harlan was with him that day. "I have never seen a man break the way Chuck broke in that moment," the doctor recalled. He didn't say a word for almost 10 minutes. He just stared at her picture with tears rolling down his face. When he finally spoke, his voice was shaking. He said, "I missed 30 years of my daughter's life. 30 years. The first meeting between father and daughter took place in early 1994 at a quiet hotel suite in Beverly Hills. Chuck arrived early, pacing the room like a caged animal. When Dana walked through the door, he froze. For several long seconds, neither of them moved. Then Chuck stepped forward, wrapped his arms around her, and began to sob. Deep, uncontrollable sobs that shook his entire body. He cried like a child who had just been found after being lost for decades, Dr. Harlan said. He kept repeating the same words over and over. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I wasn't there." That single meeting cracked open something deep inside Chuck Norris. For the first time in his public life, the invincible warrior felt like a failure. He had spent decades building an image of the perfect, unbreakable American hero, the man who could solve any problem with his fists or his principles. Yet here was living proof that he had failed at the most important role of all, being a father. The secret created painful conflicts in his professional and personal life. In the mid-1990s, as Walker, Texas Ranger was at the peak of its popularity, Chuck lived in constant fear that the tabloids would discover Dina and turn the story into a scandal. He paid for her education quietly. He helped her financially when she needed it, but he never brought her into the spotlight. He worried that revealing her existence would damage the family values image that CBS promoted so heavily for his show. The same network that celebrated him as a moral hero on screen would have torn him apart if the public learned he had a secret daughter from an extramarital affair. At home, the revelation strained his second marriage to Gina. Though Gina was supportive, the sudden appearance of an adult daughter Chuck had never mentioned created tension in awkward family gatherings. His older sons from the first marriage felt betrayed. Old wounds from the divorce reopened. Chuck found himself caught between the public legend he had built and the private guilt he could no longer escape. Dr. Harlan witnessed many of these struggles firsthand. Chuck would sit in my office some days and say, "Doc, I can fight 10 men at once, but I don't know how to fight the feeling that I abandoned my own child." He carried that guilt like a stone in his chest. It never left him. Even in his final years, when he spoke about Dina, his voice would crack. He told me more than once, "I was never the father she deserved. I was just the man who showed up too late." That guilt became one of the heaviest secrets Chuck Norris ever carried. He never made a public statement about Dina. He never brought her onto the red carpet. He protected her privacy fiercely, even as he protected his own carefully crafted image. But those who knew him well understood that the man the world saw as unbreakable was quietly broken by the one thing he could never punch or kick away: the knowledge that he had missed 3 decades of his daughter's life. And according to Dr. Harlan, that particular wound may have been one of the final burdens that contributed to Chuck's quiet departure in March 2026. The conspiracy theories about someone wanting him silenced forever were false. But the truth was perhaps even more painful. Chuck Norris spent the last 30 years of his life silencing himself, carrying the secret of a daughter he loved but could never fully claim, and the regret of a father who knew he had failed the most important fight of all. Chapter 5: The Final Truth from His Private Doctor. So what really killed Chuck Norris? Dr. Richard Harlan leaned back in his chair, the weight of 15 years of private conversations settling heavily on his shoulders. For the first time since the news broke in March 2026, he spoke without hesitation. Chuck Norris did not die from a single cause, he said quietly. There was no dramatic heart attack in the middle of the night, no hidden cancer, no sudden organ failure that appeared out of nowhere. What took him was the slow, accumulated exhaustion of an entire lifetime. A lifetime that carried more pain than most people will ever understand. The doctor paused, letting the words settle. His heart simply stopped fighting. On the evening of March 19th, 2026, in a quiet oceanfront home on the island of Kauai, Hawaii, Chuck Norris felt the end approaching. He had been feeling unusually tired for several days, but he refused to complain. That night, as the sun dipped below the Pacific, he gathered his wife Gina and their children around him. The room was filled with soft lamplight and the distant sound of waves. No dramatic hospital scene, no flashing cameras, just family. Chuck lay in bed, his once powerful frame now thin and frail. He looked at each of them one by one, his eyes clear and calm. According to Dr. Harlan, who had spoken with the family immediately afterward, Chuck's final words were simple and full of the quiet strength he had carried his whole life. "I've fought enough battles," he whispered. "It's time to rest." Then he reached for Gina's hand, squeezed it gently, and closed his eyes. At 11:47 p.m., surrounded by the people he loved most, Chuck Norris slipped away peacefully. But that peaceful ending was the final chapter of a much longer, much darker story. Dr. Harlan continued, his voice thick with emotion. People want a simple answer. There isn't one. Chuck's body had been fighting for decades, not just the physical wear from years of martial arts and film stunts, but the invisible weight he carried every single day. The doctor's mind drifted back to the deepest wounds. In 1970, Chuck lost his firstborn son, Whelan, to a landmine in Vietnam. That single event shattered something inside him that never fully healed. Every year on the anniversary, Chuck would disappear. He would sit alone for hours, sometimes at the gravesite, sometimes staring at the ocean, reliving the moment he learned his boy was gone. "I lost my son," he once told Dr. Harlan in a broken voice, "but I'm not going to lose hope." That hope became his armor, but it also became a silent burden that wore on his heart for 56 years. Then there was the secret he carried for 30 years. His daughter Dana, born in 1963 from an affair during his first marriage. Chuck only learned of her existence when she was already 30 years old. Their first meeting in 1990 was devastating. Chuck walked into the hotel suite, saw the woman who looked so much like him, and broke down crying like a child. "I missed 30 years of my daughter's life," he later confessed to the doctor. 30 years I can never get back. That guilt haunted him until the very end. Even as a global superstar, he felt like a failure as a father. And then came the years of caring for Gina. In 2017, Gina nearly died from a severe reaction to MRI contrast dye that destroyed her kidneys. Chuck dropped everything. For years, he rarely left her side. He slept in hospital chairs, learned to manage her medications, cooked special meals, and watched the woman he loved fight for her life. Dr. Harlan remembered the exhaustion in Chuck's eyes during those long nights. "I begged him to rest," the doctor said. "He just smiled that sad smile and told me, "Doc, I already lost a son. I can't lose my wife too." That kind of love cost him everything. His body paid the price. By early 2026, the cumulative toll had become too much. The grief over Wyland, the regret over Dina, the years of selfless caregiving for Gina, the decades of pushing a body that had already endured countless injuries from karate, military service, and action films. All of it finally caught up with the man the world believed was invincible. Chuck knew it was coming. In his final weeks, he told close family members he was ready. He had lived a life of meaning, and now he wanted to leave on his own terms, quietly with dignity, surrounded by love. Dr. Harlan's voice softened as he delivered the final truth. "Chuck once told me, 'I'm not afraid of death. I'm only afraid of living without meaning.'" In the end, he got exactly what he wanted. He left this world in peace with the people who mattered most beside him. No spotlight, no drama. Just a man finally laying down the burdens he had carried for 86 years. The legend of Chuck Norris, the roundhouse kicks, the Walker, Texas Ranger persona, the endless Chuck Norris facts will live on forever. But the man behind the legend was something far more human. A father who never stopped grieving his lost son. A man who carried lifelong guilt over a daughter he found too late. And a husband who nearly sacrificed his own life to save the woman he loved. And on that quiet night in Kauai, with the Pacific waves whispering outside the window, Chuck Norris finally found the peace he had been searching for his entire life. Chuck Norris is gone, not in a blaze of gunfire, not in the middle of some legendary fight scene, but in complete silence, on a remote island in Hawaii, surrounded only by the sound of the ocean and the quiet tears of his family. The man the entire world once called invincible, the walking meme of immortality, the unbreakable hero of 1,000 action films, finally laid down his fists at the age of 86. According to his private director of more than 15 years, this was not a simple medical emergency. It was the final chapter of a lifetime of silent suffering. A heart that had been quietly breaking for decades finally gave out. Weighed down by the grief of losing his firstborn son, Wyland, in Vietnam, the lifelong guilt of discovering a secret daughter he had missed for 30 years, and the exhausting years he spent watching his beloved wife Gina fight for her life after a devastating medical reaction. He carried every wound in silence. He smiled for the cameras while the pain ate him alive inside. He became the symbol of strength for millions, while dying slowly from the one battle he could never win, the battle with his own broken heart. Dr. Richard Harlan's final words still echo. Chuck didn't want the world to see him weak. He wanted to leave this life with dignity, without forcing anyone to carry the full weight of his pain. So the question that now haunts every fan, every follower, every person who ever cheered for the toughest man on earth remains. Did Chuck Norris really die from a routine medical emergency? Or did this unbreakable legend finally choose to lay down his burden and leave without letting the world know just how much he had truly suffered? The invincible man is gone. But the pain he hid for 86 years is still here. What do you think really happened? Drop your thoughts below. Do you believe the doctor's truth? Or do you suspect there are even darker secrets still buried with him? If this story shattered you, smash that like button right now. Subscribe to Hollywood Files and turn on post notifications, because we're going even deeper into the shadows next time. Thank you for walking with Chuck Norris until the very end, until the next untold chapter. Stay in the shadows.